Hello, Aquarius, and this is your October 2019 tarot forecast. So I'm giving you a tarot reading, a Celtic Cross tarot reading for the month of October for Aquarius Sun, Rising, and Moon individuals. And this will allow us to gain even more insight. In addition to what we looked at with your astrology, we take the information that we looked at with your astrology and we dive even deeper into it through a tarot reading as well. So it allows us to really zero in on the energy of the month even further. Now, one more thing before we begin. Since it is Halloween this month, I decided that I will use the Tarot of Vampires deck by Ian Daniels to give the reading a nice, dark, spooky Halloween vibe this month. So I'll be holding each card up close to the camera, right? Read each one as I go over each one through the reading, so you can sort of enjoy the artwork, since these are just here for this month and then no more for who knows how long. So let us begin. We would like a Celtic Cross reading for all Aquarius people, Sun, Rising, and Moon, for the month of October 2019. Let's see what we get. What will be the energy for the various Aquarius individuals out there for the month of October 2019? What insight and advice can we gain from the universe for Aquarius for the month of October 2019? Quite. I almost thought we had it, but not quite. And here it is. Okay, all right. The Emperor. The Nine of Skulls. The Nine of Grails. There's that ninth house activity already. The Empress. The Lord of Knives reversed. The Devil reversed. The Chariot reversed. The Moon reversed. The Eight of Knives. And a final outcome card of the Ten of Knives reversed. And there's the 10th house activity. All right, so let's dive into this. For your current outside influences representing everything that's sort of surrounding you and what's going on in your life right around the beginning of the month, we have the Emperor card. Here it is. This is your very first card, arguably the most important card in the entire reading. Don't know why it's not focusing. It's kind of annoying as hell, but that's often what we have. Well, anyway, guess it's not going to focus. The Emperor card is so often an indicator of a time in our lives where we have to communicate with some authority figure in a particular field or area of study or career endeavor that we must get some kind of approval from or certification from or something like that. It's talking about communicating or working with an established authority in order to get like a license for something or a certificate for something or what have you. So it looks like a lot of Aquarius people out there are going to be having that kind of experience around the beginning of this month of October. Now, of course, there are other possibilities. The Emperor card talks about the idea of self-discipline and willpower and being very assertive. So themes surrounding that for a lot of you this month. It's going to talk about, going back to the authority side of things, people of power, especially men of power, people like, there's a number of different areas, I suppose, anything from like politicians and state authorities to like teachers and gurus, people of power, essentially. So quite possibly being in your life in a very significant way, especially around the beginning of the month, this month. And also the idea of like seeking wisdom from an established authority figure, seeking like advice and counsel from an established authority is very often what we see for the Emperor card and how that manifests. And just for the hell of it, I'll throw it in there. Again, going back to this card's aspect of like self-discipline and stuff like that. If you find yourself feeling not so self-disciplined around the beginning of October, this card would be a pretty strong reminder that it would be in your best interest at this time to develop more self-discipline, to work on that area of yourself. So just throwing that out there in case there's any Aquarius people out there that have to work on that. Kind of doubt that, but it's a general reading. So for the challenge card, you got the 9 of Skulls. So let me just hold that up real quick. This corresponds to the 9 of Pentacles in a classic tarot deck. You got it for your challenge. It's the area of life that is pushing you into new territory this month. It is what is crossing you. It is what is providing some difficulty for you, but with the idea of this being an area in which you want to grow, learn, and evolve. Could also even maybe look at it as one of the major themes of the month. And finally, it focused. So, first of all, with the Nine of Skulls here, it's interesting, as I mentioned earlier, how in your astrology, a significant amount of ninth house activity, many things here. I have it right here. I'll just pull it up real quick and sort of reference it again at the same time here, just kind of multitasking. Why not? Um, a number of things finishing up their transit through your ninth house, but Mars in particular, remember, was just entering your ninth house starting October 4th, giving you much energy for that. And of course, the ninth house being about your ideals, your belief systems, a long distance travel, philosophy, that sort of thing. So I would say this and the next card is also a 9, just further emphasizing that this month. But this is showing up for your challenge, saying that you can expect challenges perhaps around that area. But if we look at the 9 of Skulls in particular, we have this idea of the harvest, the complete and total success, the rewards for work that you had done at a previous time, abundance and stuff like that. But again, this is like your challenge this month. It's your challenge to sort of reap the rewards for what you've done. If we were to look at this in a different sense, you could almost say like your challenge this month is also to make enough time to enjoy what you have worked for. That's a very key aspect of the 9 of Skulls or 9 of Pentacles, at least in the way that I've always looked for it. It's like you've got all this wealth. Well, are you enjoying it? Or it may not be literal physical wealth, but you've got something that you've worked hard for. Are you enjoying it? Are you able to make the time and take the time to enjoy it? Because I would say that's another thing that this card is asking you to do, especially in this context. So interesting stuff right there. Let me think if there was anything else I wanted to mention with that. Because this is crossing over the Emperor card, which could almost be an indicator that, again, in order to gain this kind of success this month, you're going to have to work with some kind of authority figure. This card literally falling right on top of the Emperor card in your reading. So do consider that. For the underlying energy, everything forming a foundation for your current situation, as well as your immediate environment, you got the 9 of Grails. So let me hold that up. This card corresponds to the 9 of Cups in a classic tarot deck. So, 9 of Grails, 9 of Cups is talking about the idea of satisfaction and fulfillment and wishes fulfilled. Yes to pleasure. Now, remember, this is the underlying energy. So this is like saying that you are supported by pleasure and satisfaction this month. So that's not too bad of a thing. It also may be talking about people around you who perhaps are feeling very pleased, very satisfied this month. And hopefully, you just sort of look at more of the context here if you're reading, get a feel for this. Okay, that's interesting. I just picked something very interesting out of your reading. It could even be that a lot of you have people around you who are maybe having some parties or just various, I don't know, more formal get-togethers or something. I don't know, just like social events and enjoying themselves, having the pleasure and satisfaction that this card talks about. And they're trying to get you in on it. But for some reason, dear Aquarius, many of you are not giving yourself permission to experience that kind of pleasure this month. And I'm picking this out from multiple cards that showed up in your reading. It's almost like the cards are sort of wanting to push you in the direction of, or advising you to allow yourself to enjoy the pleasures of life more this month. So do remember that, if there's people around you that are like, hey, do you want to go to this party, or do you want to hang out, or do you want to go to this social gathering or event, or go out to dinner or something? Maybe consider like making that more of a priority and saying yes to that, making that more of an accessible thing for you this month, allowing yourself to experience that, because that seems to be really poking out, or sort of sticking out almost like a sore thumb, as they say in this reading, as I look over it as a whole. Anyway, on that note, for the past issues that you may have had to deal with that then lead to your present situation, you got the Empress. The Empress. So you got the Emperor earlier, and you got the Empress. So it's funny how the Emperor was the first card. So actually you got the Empress in the past and then the Emperor in the present. So a couple different possibilities here. First of all, the Empress is a card that talks so much about blessings and abundance and all that, that it may be the case that many Aquarius people have not even really had any significant challenges recently, but instead have had great blessings and abundance. For others, however, the Empress also very often talking about love and relationships being ruled by Venus. There may have been challenges surrounding love and relationships that then have somehow led to your current, perhaps financial issues, or issues of having to talk to an authority or get the approval of authorities, or whatnot, as we see with the Emperor card. Or maybe they're not connected entirely, or not connected at all. This is just saying that issues surrounding that. It's interesting, of course, also Venus talks about money as well, as does the Empress card being ruled by Venus. And so we may have recent challenges around money, and then we have that Nine of Skulls popping up for the challenge card, which is again saying, hey, make sure that you are taking the time to enjoy the things that you've worked for, whether it's money that you've worked for or just what you've worked for in general. Make sure you're taking the time to do that. But yeah, the Empress in general is advising us to be very optimistic, to be open to new ideas, to be receptive, to get out into nature and experience nature, all of these sorts of themes. And so this is another card that I would say, even though it's in the past, I would say is sort of also commenting on this theme that seems to be coming up here for you, Aquarius, this month, which is to let yourself be more free to enjoy the pleasures of life, because the Empress is very much about that too. She's all about luxury and enjoying sensual pleasures. I mean, she's literally ruled by the planet Venus, which is all about that kind of stuff. So yeah, quite the indicator there. In fact, I'm not saying that everything always perfectly connects like this, but it just might be the case that many of you, or at least some of you, have had the issue in the recent past of not letting yourself enjoy the pleasures of life, or enjoy what you've worked for, enjoy your money or some kind of abundance, or whatever that the Empress talks about. And that's why we see more so in the present the cards saying, hey, make sure that you take the time to enjoy that. Again, everything doesn't always perfectly fit together that way. At least I don't believe that it does. But in this case, it just might, because that's too perfect of a fit. It's almost too perfect to be something else, or I don't want to say be coincidence, but whatever. But maybe it is. Maybe it's not always connected. This is a general reading again, after all. So for what you hope to achieve, you got the Lord of Knives reversed. So let me hold that up real quick. Show it to you upright. You did get it reversed. You got this in what you hope to achieve, what you're reaching for, your highest goal, or I'm totally misspeaking here, and Mercury's not even retrograde yet. Your highest hope or your highest goal. I want to combine the words hope and goal at the same time, so I guess that's what happens when you're not careful. But yes, this is what you are reaching for this month, sort of your highest wish this month. Also, this card corresponds to the Knight of Swords in a classic tarot deck. So it's an interesting placement, a couple different possibilities. Again, you did get it reversed. When we look at the Lord of Knives reversed or Knight of Swords reversed, it often points to this idea of like being dull and uninspired, but this is what you got and what you hope to achieve. And so it would be saying that you're hoping to overcome any kind of dullness or feelings of being uninspired, or like stagnation or a lack of mental clarity and that sort of thing. Now, with it also being a court card, it is quite possibly representing you, Aquarius, first of all, because it's going to talk about an adult, usually male air sign, but this is a general reading. It could be just an adult air sign in general, and refer to yourself. In other words, the reversal indicating that what you're hoping for this month is to get back to yourself, get back to feeling like in alignment with yourself and feeling like yourself, and not feeling like dull or uninspired or stagnant or confused or whatever. Because indeed, Aquarius, if you don't already know, you are an air sign. You're meant to feel clear. You're not meant to feel dull or uninspired or anything like that. Especially, you're meant to be very clear. You're literally the smartest sign of the zodiac. I've been saying that for a long time. You're literally the sign that has the highest probability, I would say, the greatest predisposition to intelligence of a specifically intellectual sense. So it's not natural for you to feel dull or uninspired. So you may be hoping to get back to yourself. Again, what this reading seems to be suggesting is that allowing yourself to experience the pleasures of life more will help you with that this month. But regardless, let's move on to another possibility with the reversal of this falling in this position. And that is that you may be wanting to overcome potentially a conflict of some kind with another air sign. So that could be a Gemini, a Libra, or another Aquarius, especially if it's an adult male Gemini, Libra, or Aquarius like yourself, wanting to resolve a conflict. The reversal will often indicate a conflict, so resolve a conflict with that individual. Now, to talk a little bit more about the energy of this card upright, what you might be reaching for, if it's not about a specific person, not even maybe you're not feeling dull or uninspired or whatever, maybe what you're just hoping to overcome a blockage to. We have the idea of great mental clarity, scientific thinking, mental prowess, being able to effectively argue for your ideas and your opinions and stuff like that, intellectual breakthroughs, discoveries, that sort of thing. These are all themes that connect with the Lord of Knives or Knight of Swords that it corresponds to in its upright position. So the reverse will be like saying, hoping to overcome a blockage to that. And for many of you, it could be more than one of the possibilities that I lay down for these things. Again, this is a general reading, so we're covering a lot of people. We're covering 1/12 of the Earth's population with every single one of these readings. So that's a lot of people. So for the near future, representing about the first week or two of the month, you got the Devil reversed. So let me hold that upright and up close to the camera for you to observe. So the main possibility we see with this card in this context especially is because in this deck, similar to the Thoth deck, the Devil card is far more signifying the idea of enjoying the physical pleasures of life, and you got it reversed. This is yet another indicator, especially in that first week or two, to let yourself enjoy the pleasures of life, especially the physical pleasures of life. In fact, the reversal is indicating that the greatest probability right now is that most of you aren't doing that. Quite frankly, most of you are not doing that when you should. You should let yourself enjoy the physical pleasures of life more of the time, particularly in that first week or two of this month. Although other cards would say the whole month, but this is emphasizing the first week or two. So do that. One other possibility with the Devil reversed, I mean, really there's quite a few, but I'm trying to narrow it down to the ones most likely within the context of your reading. But it's just that it can sometimes be an indicator of breaking free from limitations. So that's a good thing. If you find that you've been sort of held down by whatever, this would be a time of breaking free from that. And I also see that it looks like, at least for some of you, that probably is an issue, as I can see the Eight of Knives and your hopes or fears, which we'll get to a little bit later on here in a bit, really. Is there certainly a desire to break free, it looks like, at least with some of you. And it looks like the good news is a lot of you, or many of you, are going to be breaking free in this first week or two. So that's what we have there. It's interesting also, and this may or may not relate directly to your reading, but the Devil card and the Emperor card that you got earlier have some very interesting connections, particularly through the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. If we line them up on each Sephiroth, all 22 cards of the major arcana, we see the Devil card and the Emperor card landing together. And so it makes me wonder if it could even be that somehow this breaking free of limitation is connected to maybe the acceptance or embracing of the necessary limitation of working with the authority that the Emperor card represents for you at the beginning of this month. Did you follow all of that? I hope so. Because it kind of seems like that's what we could have going here. Especially when just they're showing up sort of next to each other, like the Emperor being like more what's happening immediately at the beginning of the month, and then the Devil card being like the near future, indicates the probability of a connection. Anyway, For your attitude or position on the situation about halfway through the month, you got the Chariot reversed. So I'll hold that up upright to the camera so you can see what it looks like normally. This represents your attitude or position on the situation, how you're feeling, not necessarily what is manifesting. So, one of the primary meanings of the Chariot reversed is lacking in self-confidence. So if that resonates with you, recognize that as an area in which you particularly must work or should work this month. Another thing is the idea of things getting out of control. And so if that resonates with you, recognize that as an area in which you personally should work this month. However, remember what we saw earlier saying that, well, maybe the control that you seek is through relying on an authority figure of some kind, or maybe the control that you seek is through more self-discipline, which that might sound a bit contradictory. Might sound like I'm even contradicting myself by saying, okay, on the one hand, with the Emperor, you should, if you haven't already, develop more self-discipline this month. But on the other hand, there are these cards saying, enjoy the pleasures of life more this month. But actually, that's not true. Because the reality is, if you develop self-discipline, you can also sort of ensure that you carve out time for yourself to enjoy the pleasures of life. You know what I mean? It's like if you're disciplining yourself, if you're bringing order and structure to your life, then you can easily designate time for work and things that you have to get done and time for play, for pleasurable activities. And so if that sounds like something you need to do, that's what I'd recommend. In fact, the Chariot card also, when we recognize its Cancer rulership, we can say in its reversal is also indicating a feeling of disorder, of not having things in order. But of course, I guess that sort of relates to the meaning that I was just going over. Now let's see here. What else might this tie into? Well, with certain cards in this reading, if we connected them to this card, there may be the risk of some level of confusion, feeling confused this month. But there's also, on the positive side, the possibility with the Chariot reverse sometimes of indicating like emotional problems overcome. So while for some of you this may manifest sort of negatively, where you're feeling out of control or not enough willpower or ego strength or whatever, some of you actually may have this manifest positively and you're feeling like you've overcome emotional difficulties and challenges. So there's a little bit of a silver lining with the reversal of this card. But anyway, yeah, I would say the highest probability based on what we've seen thus far is feeling, well, actually, I'd say it's kind of a tie between the first two that I went over now, as I really think more about it. Feeling like you don't have enough determination and willpower and ego strength, and also the feeling that things may be getting out of control, needing more security, and then, of course, also the stuff I talked about with discipline and whatnot. So, all right, anyway, let's just move on. For the outside force coming in, you got the Moon reversed. So let me show you that upright and up close. Now, this doesn't represent something relating directly to you per se, but instead, it represents something coming at you, whether it's a person or situation or whatever. So, got a reversal, but show it with the reversal. There's a couple different possibilities come to mind with this. And in fact, what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to draw an 11th card for you guys, as I often do, to get more information on sort of how I think this is going, to get more clarification on it. And we'll come to it more specifically later. Okay, that's the 8 of Skulls. So we're going to get that. Let's see here. So that's okay. That's good then. All right. It's because basically the way that I'm seeing this play out is one is very positive and one is pretty negative. And the 8 of Skulls, fortunately, is confirming that it's far more likely to be positive, the positive outcome than the negative one. So, okay, that's good. On that note, let me explain what I see here with the moon reversed, outside force coming in. So remember, this is something or someone coming at you, or it could even be like a whole situation or whatever coming at you. Well, in light of just having drawn the 8 of Skulls and interpreting this more positively, the moon reversed can often be sort of like the end of fantasy and false belief, regaining mental clarity, getting back in touch with reality. And it's interesting how we also saw that as something that a lot of you are likely trying to overcome this month, with that Lord of Knives reverse. And what you hope to achieve is like you're trying to get your mental clarity back. You know, you're trying to be able to see things clearly again. Well, it looks like someone or something or some situation is quite possibly assisting you in doing so, in doing that this month. Could even be that there's someone, how do I put this? Someone who's very good at dispelling illusions that comes your way, because the moon card upright is all about illusions and confusion and stuff like that. I mean, it has positive meanings too, but all about illusion. The reversal, it's not always going to be this, of course, but many times it can be, in my experience, the dispelling of illusions as well, or at least the end of illusions, fantasies, and false belief, the regaining of clarity, and thus, therefore, the dispelling of illusions. Someone who's very at that coming your way to assist you this month, sort of help you gain clarity about something. So that's very interesting. And if you're curious, the negative possibility that I was considering was that it might even be almost the exact opposite of that, where there is still confusion or maybe someone who's unwilling to face reality who then enters your life and adds confusion to things. But again, I drew that 11th card, the 8 of Skulls, for added information about this, and that looks unlikely. So no need to really worry about that, I suppose. So for your hopes or fears, you got the 8 of Knives, as I mentioned earlier. So let me show you that upright, or I mean up close. It's already upright. So this is another card that is really representing much more how you're feeling, not necessarily anything that is literally physically manifesting. So in this context, it's pretty obvious. 8 of Knives here is hoping to break free from limitation. This card corresponds to the Eight of Swords in a classic tarot deck, hoping to break free from that which limits you. And maybe even a bit of a concern as we look at some of those cards from earlier about limitation in your life, like perhaps being afraid if you can work with it effectively. But of course, then that would be part of the challenge for you this month. Now, sometimes the Eight of Knives can indicate this idea of arrogance and pride, and maybe a disconnection between your mind and your emotions, the intellect and the heart. So if that resonates with you, again, recognize that as an area in which you personally must or should work this month. But most likely from what we're seeing with the other cards here, it's going to manifest as just wanting to break free from limitations. But remember, if you're needing to sort of work with some kind of authority this month, the lesson of the Emperor card is to integrate that established authority into your life rather than fear it or be antagonistic to it or whatever. In a more generalized spiritual sense, we're looking for win-win scenarios. We're not trying to make anyone the enemy, though, of course, within the context of human experience, it's often sort of necessary to have that, I believe, or to have enemies, or if it's not necessary, it just unfortunately happens sometimes. But ultimately, the ideal we're striving for, at least, is to not have win-lose scenarios, but have win-win scenarios. So my advice is don't make an enemy out of authority, even though, I guess some people might get a bit triggered by that because much of authority, it is true, is corrupt, but it doesn't mean that authority is inherently bad. That is what the tarot teaches us, and I personally agree. You're free to disagree, but I think authority has its place within the context of human life experience, at least. And so you want to make a friend out of authority and not make it your enemy. But, that's just my opinion. What you do is up to you. And this is coming from someone who is very quick to challenge authority when I see authority as corrupt, by the way. So don't get the wrong idea here. For the final outcome card, how you are concluding the month of October, you got the 10 of Knives reversed. And especially in this instance, or I guess actually, no, we could say probably pretty much in general, but also applying to your reading in particular, we'd like this card better reversed. So I'll show it to you upright, over there, and up close, so you can really see what it looks like. When I first got this deck, I almost thought that some of the artwork was maybe a bit much for my taste, like maybe a little too extreme or whatever. But after working with it for a bit, I found that it really sort of grows on you. And I found myself really appreciating and enjoying the sort of dark vampiric imagery of it. And I also came to respect it a lot more too, as I discovered that the symbolism in the cards is very well placed and very strategically placed. It isn't just there randomly, but instead each and every card has very well thought out designs and placements of things, very thorough symbolism, like we see with a deck as magnificently well done as the Rider-Waite or the Thoth decks. But anyway, so 10 of Knives reversed. Well, fortunately, getting this card reversed is typically indicating the avoidance of disaster, So if there was something that was quite problematic heading your way, the good news for most Aquarius people is that the greatest probability for you is that you will avoid that disaster. Again, this is what I was saying was likely to be the more positive outcome that I was able to indicate by drawing another card, getting the Eight of Skulls, which I'll go over that briefly too here in a bit. But yes, the avoidance of disaster, very good thing indeed. It's interesting, of course, because we have, as I went over in the astrology, the Mercury entering its retrograde shadow on October 11th this month, and then going retrograde on Halloween, the very last day of the month. And so maybe you're avoiding a disaster in that area, since we also, for you, have a lot of, or a strong dose anyway, I would say, at the very least, of ninth house activity this month. So a desire to travel when Mercury retrograde is like saying, hey, don't do that. So perhaps it's saying that the Mercury retrograde may cause some issues for many of you, but this card is also saying that you're far more likely to avoid any kind of disaster than you are for that to happen. Let's see what else. What else did I want to say? Oh, just that. Speaking of the astrology and the houses, this being a 10, the 10th house, we also saw that activated significantly in your astrology reading. And thus, therefore, I would say with the 10th house of career, the idea of the avoidance of any kind of disaster surrounding your career. So your career, your goals, your public reputation, your main focus in life, that sort of thing. So good news, ultimately. It's like you may have a close brush with some difficulty, but you're likely to avoid it. The only thing, again, it's not likely to manifest negatively, I don't think, from what we drew with the 11th card here, the Eight of Skulls. But just in case, I'll mention that the 10 of Knives reversed can sometimes be an indication of still remaining sort of trapped in the illusion. So I would say if you're feeling unclear by the end of the month, in a mental sense, be aware of that. Be aware of the possibility of illusions and confusion and deception. Just be extra careful. But again, I don't think that's going to be that likely because of this card right here, the Eight of Skulls, that we drew to get a little more information and insight into specifically what direction this reading is going and taking, particularly in its latter areas. So this card, the Eight of Skulls, corresponds to the Eight of Pentacles in a classic tarot deck. And it's all about the idea of regular hard work, working away at something that is interesting to you, a creative endeavor, your job or career, particularly if it's, again, something interesting to you that gets you, sort of gets your juices flowing, perhaps. It can also be, to get a little more specific, the idea of starting over, in a sense, in one's career, but after having figured out what is truly right for you when it comes to career. Now, is it going to manifest that specifically for all of you, for every Aquarius out there? Of course not. But I'm just mentioning that because when we look at the sort of sequence of the suit of discs or pentacles or skulls, or whatever you want to call them, that's what we see. Like in the 7, it's like, like a reconsideration and a search for our true calling in life, essentially our true work or vocation. And then in the 8th, it's like kind of the new beginning with that, as we're getting into that, as we're working away at that and that sort of thing. So that may manifest for quite a few of you as well this month. I don't think it'll be anywhere even close to all of you, especially since I just drew this card to get greater clarity about where this reading was going. But for what it's worth, that is there. So the only other thing I would say with that is that kind of comments more on this theme that we also see pop up a bit in this reading of developing self-discipline and being like being able to bring more structure to your life so that you're able to focus on your work when that's appropriate and focus on your play and pleasure when that's appropriate, rather than letting things remain in a state of chaos and confusion. Because I think one thing that we can really take away from this reading for you, Aquarius, this month is no matter how this stuff manifests, the last thing you want this month is chaos and confusion. And what you want more than anything this month is clarity and structure and knowing what to do and when to do it. So there, if that's the big takeaway with this reading, then I would, or if you're asking what the big takeaway with this reading is, I would say it is that. And it's also make time again for yourself to enjoy the pleasures of life, because it looks like there's quite the high probability of a lot of you not giving yourselves enough time to do that this month. So, all right, that's all I have for you, Aquarius. Wow, this has been a fairly lengthy reading, quite dynamic. Should be an interesting month for you guys. Regardless, I hope you have a magnificent month. And again, happy Halloween. And I hope you enjoyed this reading. If you did, feel free to subscribe if you're not already, as I do indeed plan on returning soon with more astrology and tarot related content, including astrology and tarot forecasts. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.